Okay, hello. This is Wednesday, May the 6th, 2026. This is Tea with Jamie, and today I am going to be reviewing the news. No particular deep dives in this episode. I'm just going to scan the headlines, talk about the Formula One news happening this morning. It is about 5 to 8 East Coast time in the morning, if you'd like some context. All right, let's kick off with racingnews365.com. Okay, this is interesting. All right, so this is an article by Jake Nickel, and it's called Oldest Living F1 Driver Passes Away Aged 100. Wow, okay. So Hermano da Silva Ramos, the oldest living Formula One driver, has died aged 100 in France. So here's the Ramos facts. He had a best finish of 5th in the 1956 Monaco Grand Prix. He also competed in Le Mans and the Mille Miglia. So he definitely had a pretty glittering career there. Oh, he was Brazilian. Okay. One point here, he's called Hernando da Silva Ramos. And at the top, he's called Hermano da Silva Ramos. So what is it? Let me dig a little deeper. Let's see. Let's do a little Google search here. I'm seeing Hermano everywhere. I think his name, yes, he's Brazilian/French. Died May 4th, 2026 in Biarritz. Nice. Yeah, so it's Hermano. It's not Hernando or whatever I said earlier. Hermano da Silva Ramos. Sad to see him go, but he reached a ripe old age of 100, and he competed in 7 Grand Prix in 1955 and 1956 for the Gordini team. So yeah, he was 5 years into the championship at that point, because as we know, it started in 1950. So that's like going back to 2021 from here. So yeah, very, very impressive chap. And sad to see him go. Yeah, so the oldest living Grand Prix winner and world champion is Sir Jackie Stewart. And he's the last surviving winner and champion from the 60s. Wow, Sir Jackie. He's 86, 10 months, and as of, I'm assuming today, 25 days. So yeah, what a legend Jackie Stewart is. Sir Jackie. Incredible. But yeah, R.I.P. Hermano. Moving on. Let's bring it up to date. Let's just go to f1.com and see what news is going on there. All right, this is interesting. I want to hear what Laurent Mekies has to say about Red Bull's step forward in Miami. So this, like I say, is an article on f1.com. Doesn't say who it was written by. Let's do a little scrolly. I want to go to the quotes. I always like to hear the actual words that they say. Okay, so we all know what happened with Hadjar, crashed out, what was it, lap 5, something like that. So hard to judge on so few laps. Verstappen, also kind of hard to judge because he was on that wacky tyre strategy. But you can, look at the qualifying times and, the race pace of him overtaking the whole of the grid after that early pit stop. Anyway, let's see what Laurent has to say. There is a definite step forward. We left Japan 1.2 seconds away from pole, China 1 second away from pole. Oh, well, that's going backwards, right? However, in Miami, obviously they got closer. So anyway, that's me paraphrasing. Back to Laurent. Competition was not going to wait for us with their updates. Everybody has updated their car, but certainly we knew that on top of the development race, we had to solve some of our issues, and we knew there was lap time in it. So to see us this weekend qualifying 6/10 away from pole on Friday and less than 2/10 away from pole on Saturday is a big indication of the size of the progress. Back to me. Yes, so much better. Over a second off prior to this weekend, and now in Grand Prix qualifying being 2/10 away. I mean, very, very impressive. It's hard to read it over just one track, right? Because that's not a trend. That is could just be track characteristics that suit the Red Bull better than the previous tracks, but definitely showing huge progress. I'm not going to read all of it. I don't want to completely plagiarize this, but let's see. I think overall, big picture, the race was strong, confirming the good signs shown in quali. It was not strong enough for P1 and P2, but perhaps able to put us in a fight between P3, P4 and P5. So yeah, like I say, I think without Max's spin, we would have seen the true pace. And the two up ahead were clearly very fast. Both of those drivers, right car, right track, right time. It was a bit more of a struggle for everyone else in the top tier of this series. So Leclerc was sort of hanging out between the back of Norris and the chasing pack with George Russell and Oscar Piastri. So there was sort of a three-step, seemingly, performance there of the top two, Charles, and then George and Oscar. Now, where would Verstappen have fit in that little trio pack there? Hard to say. I'm guessing he probably would have been somewhere between George and Charles, right? Between those two places. They were never sort of in the same strategy at any one time. So it was really hard to compare because obviously Max put on the hard tyres so early in the race and they were hard tyres early on compared to the mediums that everyone else is on. And then as the tyre degraded over the course of the race, they were never sort of like for like at any point, so super hard to compare. So it's a real shame that Max spun it actually at the start because we don't really have a direct comparison. Goes on to talk about Hadjar. All right, so he said, regarding Hadjar, we had a tough weekend. To be honest, we know we haven't done everything perfectly on our side without giving away too many secrets. You may find out for yourself that we have had a straight line performance deficit on this car for most of the weekend. This has not helped the overall performance. Okay, very interesting. So, slower on the straights for Hadjar. I mean, that could be they went the wrong direction setup-wise with Hadjar, or it could be they have different components on the car that advantage Verstappen on straight line speed. So it could be either. He doesn't really go into that. But they didn't have a like-for-like car. That wasn't the same. It sounds like he and or the team are taking the blame on that because Hadjar was a long way off. Now, if you sacrifice speed on the straights, does that mean therefore that he had an advantage in the corners? Or is it just that he had the same car in the corners but was disadvantaged on the straights? And then you can start to explain that sort of 0.8, 0.9, 1 second difference between Hadjar and Verstappen over the course of the weekend. Because that was really trending in a bad direction if you're a Hadjar fan compared to the first three races, right? He was much closer to Max. So again, you can't read anything super quick into this because it's one weekend and there was no like for like. Okay, let's move on to planetf1.com. Okay, so Oscar Piastri has thoughts on the F1 changes for Miami. So these are the power unit changes that they brought in. The article is called Piastri warns F1 changes haven't fixed the problem after Miami's speed shock. Okay, what was shocking? Let's find out. So he said qualifying was a bit, quote unquote, better with the harvesting limit being reduced. But it looks like in the race, he still had some issues with that speed delta. So he said, qualifying's a bit better. And now let's quote directly. The races are basically exactly the same, and I think today was my first proper experience of overtaking people and then having to defend and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy, to be honest. At one point, George was 1 second behind me and managed to overtake me by the end of that straight. It's just a bit random. Closing speeds are huge, and trying to anticipate that as the defending driver is incredibly tough to do. Obviously, for the overtaking driver, I wasn't that pleased with one of the moves that George did. I think he means George was the overtaking driver, right? Back to the quote. But I kind of found myself almost doing the same move about 5 laps later just because the closing speed is enormous. So from that side of things, not much has really changed. Okay, so we didn't really hear much about this issue of the differential between car that's harvesting versus a car that's boosting. This was the cause of that huge crash for Ollie Berman jinking around Colapinto. And this is the first time I've heard someone post Miami talking about that. And he said it's not really that different. So that is a little concerning. Interesting. So what they did was they reduced the amount of boost. So that reduced that differential a bit. But clearly he said that, in his opinion, that's not enough because the closing speeds are still huge. Okay, well, they also have had meetings with the GPDA, right? The Grand Prix Drivers Association, whatever that stands for. Basically, the drivers get together and discuss how they're going to deal with this speed delta. And they all agreed, actually this was prior to Japan, so it was kind of crazy that it happened, that they're going to be much more cautious about moving in the braking zone moving forward because you never quite know if the car behind is going to just shoot past you. So if you do what Colapinto did and jink to the left, you can just, even if you don't impact that driver overtaking, they're so freaked out by you moving to the left or the right that could completely throw you off, literally throw you off the track. So there's the sort of gentlemanly approach to going racing, and there are the sort of technical side of how much do we try and limit that difference in speed. So he basically says later on that not much really can change until the engines change, which in reality is not going to happen probably until 2031, maybe 2030. So we got this to deal with for 26, 27, 28, 29 at the earliest. 4 or 3.5 seasons, 3 3/4 seasons, right? And in reality, probably 4 3/4 seasons. So that's fun. All right, let's try Autosport. All right, well, this is very appropriate. Let's talk about this. So this is an article called Why Time is Running Out to Make Bigger F1 Power Unit Changes for 2027. And this is in Autosport, written by Philip Clearen, and these are quotes by Andrea Stella from McLaren. He's basically talking about here, and I'll get some direct quotes, that if changes need to happen by 2028, we need to lock these decisions down now. So forget 27, that's done. The power unit is locked in for 27 already because it's too late to change it. We need to lock these rule changes in now so that the teams, the power unit manufacturers, can make the appropriate changes for 2028. Okay, anyway, let's hear what Andrea has to say. So before we get there, let's talk about what they're talking about changing. From the power unit side, the big change is the ratio between the internal combustion engine and the MGUK, the electrical component. Right now, it is about 50-50, as we've talked about ad nauseum. What they want to do is slightly increase the output of the internal combustion engine and reduce the output of the electrical motor and make it closer to how it was before. So the impact of the electrical components and the battery and the recharge and the deployment and everything is reduced in its effect, and we're moving closer to a dominant internal combustion engine, which significantly impacts the effect of the electrical power. I don't think I phrased that particularly wonderfully, but a small shift in the ratio has a big impact. So I think they want to go more 60-40 in favor of ICE versus 50-50 as it is now. So a little bit down on electrical, a little bit up on the internal combustion engine. And I believe, based on previous articles that I've read, that will make a huge difference. How do they do that? Well, it's very easy to turn down the output of the battery, output of the MGUK, right? They just turn it down. They just restrict how much power is allowed to be used at any one time. That's just a setting. That's just, you could do that this afternoon. The internal combustion engine, though, what they would have to do is they would have to increase the amount of fuel flowing through the engine. So more fuel and air mixture would go into the combustion chamber, more combustion would happen, bigger bang, higher output. But they need to make sure that all the components are up to that in the ICE. There's not a reliability problem. There's not a safety problem with that. Something blowing up spectacularly. And then all of a sudden the engines are not getting to the end of the race, or they're having to use 10 internal combustion engines per year, and it would just be a farce. So not only do they have to test that, but if they do find out that it's not strong enough, they have to then redesign the power units, which is not the act of a mere moment. So that's essentially what he's saying. Let's get some actual direct quotes. Harder adjustments to the power unit in order to improve F1 in general, I personally think, are required. They will have to do realistically with the fuel flow to increase the power from the internal combustion engine. I think they might have to do with harvesting more power than the power you actually deploy, because you spend much more time deploying electrical power rather than harvesting it. This can be rebalanced by harvesting to a larger power than we do today. From 350 kilowatts can go to 400 kilowatts, can go to 450 kilowatts. And then I think we just need bigger batteries. Okay, so yeah, fuel flow, but also he's suggesting increasing the amount of electrical power that can be generated. But even that's not good enough, because if you brim the battery, you can't brim it any more than is the max. So they need bigger batteries. Now, what you may not realize is that the batteries on these cars, the capacity is tiny, absolutely puny compared to just a regular road car, fractional. So bigger batteries would have a huge effect. You'd have much more ability to deploy power. You wouldn't have to have this super clipping and just running out of juice at the end. We haven't even got to places like Baku with that huge long straight. I mean, I'm seeing them, going into that back straight in Miami with a full battery and having zero battery 3/4 of the way down. Now, it didn't have a huge effect there because it wasn't that long, but that whacking great home straight in Baku, at what point are they going to run out of juice? And then are they just getting slower and slower and slower into the first turn? That would be extraordinarily embarrassing. The only way you can sort that out is with a bigger battery. And I'm not even convinced in Baku that that final sector before that straight is particularly good at charging the battery. You got a lot of stops in sector 1, with those sort of 90-degree turns around the sort of city blocks. But when you get to like the castle section, that old section, it's very windy there. It's very slow. There's not huge, great stops. I'm a layman. I don't know. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not an engineer of any stripe when it comes to this stuff. But it seems to me that they need bigger batteries for sure if they're going to stick with this 50-50 split. So anyway, increase the fuel flow, bigger batteries, more charging capability when under braking, super clipping, etc. Lift and coast too. He goes on, from the perspective of power unit manufacturers, I see this is difficult for 2027 because the implication for the battery size and the implication for coping with the higher fuel flow, they are normally a longer lead time than the time available to go into the 2027 season. Yeah, so not enough time to instantiate these changes for 27. So I'm not going to, again, paraphrase everything, but essentially he says, if they're going to get it done by 2028, it needs to be settled now. So they got a 3-week break, another break. Can we get this done? Get them all on Zoom, get all the power unit manufacturers on Zoom, have a good meeting, invite everyone in Formula One to it. Let's get cracking, because we want these changes ASAP. I mean, part of me is wondering, if they delay it now, do the power unit manufacturers kind of not want to spend the money on it, spend the time and energy on it? So are they kind of dragging their heels to be like, oh, well, if it can't be done by 28, it'll be done in 29, but then maybe the engine's power units change in 30, so what's the point doing it for once? I don't know, call me cynical. But yeah, so anyway, that was an interesting article. Why time is running out to make bigger F1 power unit changes for 2027 on Autosport by Philip Clearin. Lot more in that article to read. But yeah, very, very interesting. There's quotes by Toto and yeah, really cool. And then finally, this is all related. The race. So this is an article called F1's Left Field Idea to Help Energy Management by John Noble. This is an idea that could be implemented quite quickly and is something I haven't seen much talk about prior to this, but makes a lot of sense. What they want to do is they want to reduce the amount of downforce that the cars have, which essentially slows them down in the corners. Reducing the downforce speeds them up on the straights, of course, as we see in Monza, but in the corners, it makes them slower. So the reason they want to slow them down is that they use less energy in the corners when they're going slower. Therefore, all of the energy demands are lower, meaning they run out of battery less, they have to charge less. So, okay, great. So there's some quotes by Nicholas Tombassis here. He said, "One of the reasons it hasn't been right there from the start is that the cars are going a bit faster than anticipated. They, brackets the teams, have found a bit more downforce than we were expecting, and therefore the energy recovered during braking is a bit lower than it would be normally. So we have a bit more of a challenge than we would have liked to have." Okay, so yeah, that's the other thing, right? When there's more downforce, there's less energy recovery in the braking phase. So what they want to do, not only is there less energy requirement throughout the slower corner, they actually want to make the braking recovery recharge phase more effective by reducing the downforce. So it's interesting that the cars are actually producing more downforce than they were predicting. So what are they suggesting doing? So this article says, "It's understood that there are 3 main downforce reducing proposals up for discussion, which will focus on tweaks to some critical areas of the car, such as the front wing, floor, and architecture in front of the side pods." All right, so they're going to try and drop downforce 20, 30, or 50 downforce points based on the level of aggression of bodywork tweaks suggested. So anywhere from 20 to 50 points of downforce. That is something that the teams could do for potentially later this season even, let alone 27. There is another reason why they want to reduce the downforce, and that is from a safety perspective. Because they weren't expecting this level of downforce, it sounds like their concern safety-wise is with the tyres. And this extra level of downforce beyond what they were expecting could be impacting the tyres to a dangerous level. I mean, is that a real safety concern, or is that an excuse, or what? I don't know. I'm just putting 2 and 2 together here and probably making 12. But more than anything, affecting the downforce levels would impact, of course, the battery side of the power unit. But all of these things are just making the cars slower and slower and slower and slower, right? At what point does this start impacting the enjoyment of Formula One and impacting the elite nature of Formula One? How slow can these cars go before everyone's like, this is too slow, guys? That's my concern. Now, I'm not fussed about a few seconds a lap slower than last year. I don't think anyone notices that. I don't think anyone cares about that in the race. That, oh no, this race is like 20, 30 seconds slower than it was last year. Who cares? Like, unless you're comparing the 2 cars on track, I don't think it really makes a big difference. But when we get to the point where they look kind of unstable through corners, or they're just look silly compared to what we're used to, then I'm starting to have a bit of an issue. I mean, let's be honest, if the fans are upset with the super clipping issue at the end of straights, when the cars are slowing down in a straight line that is only really apparent on board, they're going to be hopping mad when you see these cars gawkily bouncing around corners and tentatively applying the power and, looking kind of sad, So I'm a little concerned about this, that they go too far. Now, of course, there's a constant arms race between designers and engineers and the FIA, right? So they'll probably get the downforce back another way sooner or later. But I don't want them to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Like, does this make sense to reduce it by 50 points? I don't know. That seems dangerous to me. So yeah, I mean, this is a rambly episode. This is me working things out and figuring out my conclusions in real time for you guys. This is what I envisioned some of these episodes being, me just looking at the news and kind of musing on what's going on and sort of verbalizing it, and that's basically it. I hope that was entertaining in some form or fashion. But I will be back again tomorrow with another episode, as per usual. And I thank you once again for listening, and yeah, I will see you then. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. I've been your host, Jamie Muffett. You can find me on social media for more of this rambling nonsense under my name or F1_Jamie. This is an RPS audio production.